I've read enough comic books at this point, after 33 years now of reading comic books, that I want the art and the writing to be good. Or I should probably say, I want the writing and the art to be good. Too often we make excuses for the art because we like the story, and comic books are about storytelling. So maybe you can get away with weaker art as long as you have a stronger story. This much is true. However, there also comes a point in life where you just don't have time for crap, where you don't have time for the half-hearted efforts, or the half-good efforts, I should say. Not to impugn anyone's character to say they're not trying. I truly believe they are. They're just not good, or not to my tastes. In either case, it's not pleasing to me. So I only want to read comics these days that have a good story and good art. However you want to define good art. To everybody, that's going to be different. Yes, there are certain fundamentals of storytelling. There are certain fundamentals of drawing, of illustrating, that, it helps to follow, or at least to know the rules before you break them, that kind of thing. But to me, I want to see more beautiful art. And that's a big part of the reason why I've moved into European comics. It's not that there aren't great artists in North America anymore. Many of them don't make as many comics as they used to anymore. A lot of the current generation have different influences than, I grew up with, so their styles are different than what I'm looking for. And there are some stunning artists making great work in North America that I do enjoy when I see it, but I'm just not terribly interested in it. And part of that is, yes, it's not that I'm tired of superheroes. I don't want to be that guy who grew up and grew out of superheroes, quote unquote. I'm just a lot more picky about them now. I'm not caught up in the weekly grind of reading the books every week. I'm not caught up in the endless circles of crossovers and crises, and everything's going to change. In fact, the reason I moved out of superhero comics, to be honest, for the most part, is just that they kept changing so much, you never had a chance to sit still and enjoy something. The second anything settled down, they had to uproot everything and cause a new event to change the whole world again and again and again, and that just gets tedious. So I look towards European comics and see all these art styles with different influences, with different, commercial qualities that don't necessarily go over too well here in North America, but sell well in Europe, and I think would have a chance if they came over here, if they got in front of the right audience, if they had the right marketing, et cetera, et cetera. And I think a lot of you listening to this now who maybe haven't crossed over just yet, I'm surprised you're listening to me then, but if you haven't crossed over, open your eyes and take a look at some of the stuff I'm talking about, because I think you'd be very impressed with some of the art styles coming over from Europe into American translations or English translations, because it's just beautiful work. And what I'm getting at here is that I was reading Frank Volume 5 last night, which I've already reviewed. I have to go back to my review now to see what I wrote, but I'm rereading it now because I want to read volumes 6 and 7, which I've fallen behind on. And we can talk about the monthly grind versus the weekly grind another time. But I'm looking at the pages of this book, and every page is gorgeous. Every page is well drawn. It's beautifully colored. It's such a great book. I mean, the story is great as well. Bryce Kossu, Cossu is the artist's name, and the colorist is Yoan Guillo, I guess Guillo. It is just great looking stuff. It's part of that sort of Franga thing where it's a little bit influenced by manga, but then there's that classic Franco-Belgian storytelling mixed in. On the oversized pages, it looks great. The coloring is so good. It does look like an animated movie in many ways, but it still takes advantage of the comics format. It's brilliant art. I wish more people would see it. But that's what I mean. It's a great story and great art. It's not one or the other. It's not most of one and some of the other. And I look at a lot of my favorite books that I've read in the past few years out of Europe, and they all share that in common. They all have strong stories and amazing art. And sometimes those strong stories have a different sensibility than, the normal North American 3-act structure kind of thing. Sometimes they are a little weirder and unexpected and different in ways you might not look for, but most of them are, to be honest, to be fair. I think about Echo, which is this inventive, organic, super rendered world that's filled with interesting people, and every panel is a treat. You want to stare at everyone to see how it is they've managed to create this world where there's no electricity, but everything still seems normal. They have a big dinosaur they've strapped a airplane to the back of, basically, to create an airplane, effectively. I think of Francois Skyton, who is an architect who became a comic artist, and boy, does that ever show. You should only ever look at his work on oversized pages. Don't ever look at it shrunk down the way DC did once upon a time. It's not the way to go. The worlds he builds, the buildings he draws, the architecture, the stories are, again, they're a little different. They're not your standard North American stories by far, but very creative pages, very creative worlds, lots of fun to look at. Even Albert Uderzo's Asterix, I mean, it's a model for generations of comic artists growing up in France and Belgium. But you look at the acting and the storytelling that he packed on every single page, the inventiveness, the emotions, the action, the way the characters move. Clearly, he was also influenced by North American animation. I know he was, like a lot of European comics artists were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s even. A lot of them will cite Disney as influences, or even Warner Brothers. It's an insane amount of work put into every page of Asterix. Those are dense, packed pages. 4 tiers on every page, often 3 or 4 panels per tier, backgrounds everywhere. And to consider in the 60s, he was putting out, a page or 2 a week, every week, because this was, serialized in Pilote Journal, a weekly magazine. And it all still holds up to this day. And it's still better, I would say, than 90% of the comics art being generated now. And along those same lines, you can look at the work of Peyo or Maurice or Jean Roba or any of those classic artists in the golden age of Spiro and Pilote and all the rest back then. And they also have their modern counterparts. Obviously, those styles have been passed down over the years, and they've started to morph and change. And you have somebody like Nob or Nob, I'm not sure how you pronounce it exactly. He does the Dad comic in Spiro, which has been collected into albums, which I've reviewed a couple of, I know. It's just beautiful art style, a super rounded, it's uniquely colored. It's this weird sort of lush, every line is colored in. I generally speaking, want to see black lines in comics artwork. That is one of the books I'll make the exception for, because I think he colors in every single friggin' line. Normally I wouldn't like that, but it really works for his style, and it's great. And then, of course, there are all the Matthews, the Mathieu Bonhomme, Mathieu Reynes, Mathieu Lefray, who just create page after page of beautiful art, all in 3 completely distinctive different styles, doing different genres, often telling their own great stories. I'm at the point in life, so to speak. Sorry, it's my birthday coming up. I'm at the point in life where I don't have all the time in the world to read bad comics. I only want to read the good ones, and they're not all going to be great. I have to, take my chances like everyone does when you pick up any sort of comic book. But I love flipping through new books that I haven't tried before and seeing the art styles in there and seeing the differences. Ralph Mayer is another guy who does Undertaker, who has a very lush, sort of brushy style. It kind of reminds me almost of classic Marvel in a way, but it's very detailed, great coloring on there. The stories are great, but the art is just amazing to look at. Life is too short for comics with bad art, or even so-so art for that matter. And the more comics I read as I go along in life, the more I want them to be great and not merely adequate or good enough or filler, which is a term that's overused, but that's another story. And yes, I want to see those artists credited as well, of course. But we have to get to the point first where people actually read these books. And that's what I'm here for. That's what Pipeline Comics is here for. Hopefully, you'll follow some of my recommendations. I'll have more coming up tomorrow in another podcast because, yes, I'm podcasting all week this week, apparently. But maintain high standards for yourself. Don't read books just to read books. Find the good ones. Seek out the great ones. Listen to people who tell you which ones are the great ones. You may not always agree, but it definitely will narrow it down to a lot of books that have better odds of being great. And for goodness sakes, look for the great art. There's a lot of it out there, and we should demand more from our comics. And yes, this includes storytelling, not just illustration values. All the artists I've mentioned here so far tell amazing stories, tell great stories, use the comics medium to their advantage, and have styles that look great to me. And I'm someone who's coming over from a North American perspective, as I so often say. So I think if you're following me this far, you might like some of these styles as well. Give it a shot, and we'll talk again soon. I am available on Twitter at Pipeline Comics, as always, if you want to discuss this topic further, or if you want to get a recommendation for a book with really great art. There are plenty out there. Actually, if you check the sidebar on PipelineComics.com, I do have a short list of comics I recommend for first-time European readers that all have stellar art in them, so give them a try.